I'm Heather, and for the Module 6 discussion, I will start with Chapter 9, and I chose number 1, which is to discuss and differentiate between groups and teams. And groups are two or more people that have a common goal, and the group can either be informal or formal. Formal groups can be considered unions, management teams, and sales teams. And then informal groups don't really have rules about memberships, and they can be lunch groups, gossip session groups, I guess you would say, bowling teams, kind of like in our case study that they had. And they don't necessarily have to have specific rules about communication within that group, but they're essential to help support each other and to help accomplish tasks. It's good for the work environment to have those. Groups can evolve into becoming teams eventually, and groups are more individualized. They communicate to share information without a lot of discussion. And then with teams, each individual is a lot more reliant on one another. So there's more of an emphasis on common team goals, not just individual goals. And then teams are essentially just developed and goal-oriented groups. Teams must be developed. The authors differentiate this because if the team isn't properly developed, they'll be ineffective and they'll struggle with performance and having and achieving common goals or purpose. And that's kind of the objective in wanting to develop a team. So I would say it's pretty important. I'll cite all of that, page 259 to 261. An example that I would use for that, I think, is my spin classes for sure, or just group fitness in general, I guess. But I think spin class is a good one because you're all on individual bikes. So, I mean, I would say it's a group activity because we're all there to achieve a goal, even though they're kind of all individualized. But, everybody's relying on each other for that energy and kind of that hype up. Because, I mean, if the energy is low, then you can tell, and it kind of makes the class bad. So, I mean, and otherwise, everybody would spin by themselves. It would be a lot more cost effective and easier. You wouldn't have to go to the studio. So it's definitely more of a team situation than you would think. I also chose to talk about number 3 as far as chapter 9 goes, which is discuss the impact of various group roles discussed in the chapter. What have I played, etc. I think that the information giver is a super beneficial group role. It's important for a group to understand data and specifics within their discussion because that's going to change the outcomes of, what their decisions could potentially be, and it helps to understand who will be affected by the decisions being discussed. I mean, if you're doing stuff without accurate data, it could create a lot of problems, not only for the team, but potentially the company. If you're not paying attention to certain rules or laws, especially, I mean, that could be really bad. So that's an important role. So that being said, too, I think that the information seeker is dually important. Ensuring that the group is using correct information. That's great for holding people accountable, and it makes people want to come correct. So, I mean, if I know if somebody's going to be listening to me who tends to be more inquisitive, I will try my best to make sure that they're not finding a mistake that I've overlooked or made myself. Then I also like the evaluator critic role, and that the job of that is to help assess the actual functionality of the group and the decisions that it makes. And they question the group, which helps to, pose different questions, and therefore you'll get different solutions that you might have otherwise not thought of. I found all that from page 276 through 278. And as far as me and group roles and everything, I try to be the recorder as little as I possibly can. I don't really like my handwriting, and I have a hard time listening and taking notes and contributing. And then I've often been an energizer. I'm big into words of encouragement, affirmation, and positivity because that's how I personally respond my best. And I think that's kind of why I like, instructing people and doing things like that, because I like to encourage others and keep them going. So I often play that role in my school groups or work groups. And then I used to be more of a follower, and I guess that I still am, but it depends on the circumstance. If I'm at work and I don't really, if there's not really something I completely agree with, I'm more prone to be like, it doesn't matter, just not worth the energy of resisting and just going with it. It's not that big of a deal to me. But when it comes to school, I'm really never that way anymore anyways, because I want to be in control of my grades, I guess you would say. I'm an encourager, and I feel like that's similar to an energizer in a lot of ways too. I like to give people words of encouragement, like, come on guys, we got this. And I'll move to page 279 from this too. And it's kind of the self-centered roles. And I can totally be a dominator. I can be a little type A sometimes. So I like to figure things out and move forward with things quickly so we can get the kinks worked out. And again, I like to have some control of the way a project's going to go in school. So I think that sometimes there's a fine line between, I don't think I'm overbearing or anything, but I definitely have dominator tendencies. We'll just say that. Because, I feel like people can kind of lag. So I like to initiate things so we're not doing stuff the night before. And I've definitely been a blocker in the past, and maybe that's why I try to orchestrate a project in the beginning so it doesn't get to that point, because I've hopped on something not right at the beginning and really disliked what we were doing. So had to try to figure that out. That's awkward, and I don't like doing that. I'll go to chapter 10 to discuss effective employee recruitment. And then, actually, I'm not doing that one. I'm going to use an example from my personal and professional history to explain job blend stages of organizational socialization. This is going to be really long, but so I'm going to try to sum it up. Job blend stages of organizational communication. He proposed 3 parts that distinguish organizational communication, and these include anticipatory socialization, organizational entry and assimilation, and organizational disengagement and exit. And then the anticipatory assimilation happens before the individual is a part of the organization. The entry and assimilation is what happens from when the individual is hired until they become a true member of the organization. And then within that, there's a 3-step process, which is pre-entry, entry, and metamorphosis. Pre-entry it's a process that occurs after the individual's been invited to join the organization, but before they're actually working within the organization. Entry is when they actually enter the organization and assimilate to the culture. And metamorphosis is the last stage, and it's when they go from being new to being an established member. And the disengagement aspect of it explains the time from which an individual decides to leave an organization up until they actually depart from the company. And I'm not going to go super into the disengagement process. I mean, it includes the pre-announcement, announcement, the actual exit, and the post-exit, because my video is really long right now. So I'm just going to move from there. Page 305 to 307. Disengagement was not given as much attention as recruitment or socialization for number 4. So I'm going to talk about that. And also, I'm going to go back to the disengagement model a little bit down here, so I'm not completely forgetting about it, just so you're aware. So I'll dissect my time when I worked at a restaurant and put in my 2 weeks for number 4. And then, so the pre-announcement step, which is, part of the disengagement process where you make a conscious or unconscious signal or cues that you may not be satisfied with the organization any longer. So, I'd been telling my family and friends, even that my other job, that I didn't like the scheduling at that job and how it was starting to really bother me and stress me out, affect my day-to-day. And I don't know if at that time my work actually knew that I was bothered by it. My job that I was going to put my 2 weeks in at, that one we're specifically talking about, I didn't know that they knew that. And then the second step is the announcement. I announced it, and I told them I was putting my 2 weeks in. the managers know, my coworkers knew, I told most of them myself. And then the actual exit step is a step in the disengagement process which an organizational member officially cuts ties and leaves the organization. So after 2 weeks, I left, but I also want to point out how hard it was to work those 2 weeks, knowing I was going to leave. The post-exit step, it's the final step in the organizational disengagement process and describes the process where the organizational members try to make sense of the organization after the person who has exited left. I don't know if it was that serious for everybody. I mean, I know people missed me and stuff, but I mean, I was just there for dinner not too long ago, and I realized I sort of missed it. So, you know, I do miss my coworkers there. I miss the money I made. It was great, but I don't miss the scheduling. So I think that I'm still not really sure how I feel about it. So I'm still figuring that out, still in that part of the process. And I feel like the textbook was very accurate. I'd never really thought about these phases too much specifically, but I suppose something that was missing could be the middle phase between the announcement and of the exit step and the exit step, because in my personal experience, it's been very poignant and awkward a lot of the times for some of my work relationships when they're about to leave, because there's been cases where I wasn't sure if they were going to show up for their shift because they were just checked out, because you really see people stop caring as much in this time period for the most part. I think that's why a lot of people let people go before their 2-week thing, because they can see it's kind of bringing the group down a little bit. So case study, chapter 9. I'm going to bring up that Dante was a part of a team at work, but he was also part of groups at work. And so informal lunch group, the happy hours, the bowling team, and he received social support from this group as well, because like when his girlfriend broke up with him, and then he was part of, you know, his formal work team, linked to his performance as well as the others. So page 260, they talked about the male enhancement project and all that. And that definitely insinuates that Dante was part of a team at work. Chapter 10, Dante most certainly had anticipatory socialization, which is the anticipation that occurs before an individual actually joins an organization, page 296. And then as he selected Bedrock for a senior project, or senior, I don't know, whatever it was, he chose them for a project. So he analyzed their culture and clearly really loved it, so he had a preconception of what it would be like there, and so therefore his educational background seemed to influence him. So vocational socialization, I believe it is, and this would refer to the vocational anticipatory socialization that took place. So yeah, that is my video. I'm sorry it's long.